Welcome back, everybody, to another edition of the Gridiron Review. Alongside Bill Wagner, I'm Pete Medhurst. Great to have you with us. Youth League playoff spots at a premium in many of these Division I American Conference games where there's only 4 that qualify, and berths are at a premium. Big wins, big losses as the standings start to take shape for the playoffs. And Bill, we've got highlights this week. 9 UACs between Old Mill and Severn. I was at an 8U game on Saturday morning before I went over to Navy between Generals Highway and Brooklyn Park, 2 kingpins, future playoff combatants in the 8U, more than likely. And my man Eden Coates was putting on a show. He was tackling with form tackling that you would want to show that video to any older player, college, pro, does not matter.
He's been well coached.
He's been well coached, and that young man's form tackling was perfect. I mean, and BP's got some runners. They've got some runners. He was terrific at tackling them in the open field. Then with the game 6-0, time winding down, he went 91 yards after his defense made a 4th down stop. He went 91 yards for the game clinching touchdown to put things away for Generals Highway. And what was even more impressive was the crowd. Everybody there was great. Everybody was minding their P's and Q's, just watching the game. The chant of defense on the 4th down play by the Generals Highway fans was absolutely deafening. It was probably louder than most high school games on a Friday night. It was just awesome to see those kids playing in that environment. That is exactly what we're trying to capture with Youth League football. That's exactly what we're trying to find on a week in and week out basis for these young people to go out and perform and really enjoy it. I mean, those kids from Generals Highway had to feel, you know, they were mile high winning that game because that Brooklyn Park team is so good, so talented. Right. They win the game 12-0.
So I wanted to ask you about the playoffs. You said 4 teams. I thought it might be a little bit more than that.
What's happened is we've transitioned to American Central. Okay. And what we've done is the top 4 teams end up in one bracket, and then those other teams now play in a secondary bracket.
Okay, because it used to be that you brought one
right,
team
because,
up.
Well, and I think part of it is there's no reason why a team that's 1-7, 2-6, or whatever needs to go bang heads with another team that's 8-0 or 7-1 again.
Right. So we're really talking about the creme de la creme when we get to that playoffs.
Right, right. And I think that's what and the Central teams have playoffs too and everything. But I think what Demetrius Ballard, Jason Clark, Chris Sexton, all the powers that be with AAYFA, we're just trying to make it as competitive as possible. We're trying to keep things succinct. You know, we're not trying to have a long, drawn-out playoff. But at the same time, we're not trying to subject teams that are 1-9, 1-8, or whatever to playing games against teams that they might be outmanned against again.
So does this mean that playoff really is just 2 weeks then? We have a semifinal.
But you've got a lot of you still have the same amount of games. You just have them bracketed differently going into it. So, okay. But some of the American playoff games, I mean, those 2 weeks are going to be fantastic football.
So how many games do you have to win a championship? 2. Is what I'm asking.
If you're in a four, you've got to do 2.
Right, you're going to win a semifinal and then you're in a championship. Okay, so in years past, I would have ventured you had to win 3.
And we've talked about it, right? We've talked about it. This has been a topic of discussion for several years. I mean, you know, and when we see it, Bill, I mean, we see the same teams in a lot of cases on finals day that we saw in the weight class from the year before and the year before.
Right. Oftentimes, that first game that they played was a rally.
Yeah, it was a runaway. And there's no, like I said, there's no sense in subjecting that team that went 1-6 or 1-7 to playing that 8-0 team and getting run over again. It doesn't do anything for their morale.
Right. It doesn't help the team.
It doesn't help the team. It really doesn't help the team. You're right. That wins the game. Right. You know, it's just a way to get maybe an extra scrimmage in or something like that. But again, got to compliment Demetrius. Jason Clark, Chris Sexton, all those guys worked very hard to try and get this system. And I think this year we finally arrived at something that seems like it's equitable to everybody. We have had far less people whining about teams stacking and staying down and things of that nature. We've really only had one team that has kind of been in the crosshairs of that discussion for different reasons. But other than that, that's been it this year. And I can't remember a year where we've arrived at that kind of discussion, and we're talking about more football instead of whining about who's stacking a team and playing for the plastic trophy.
Very good.
Plastic trophy only costs you about $1.50. You can go buy one if you want.
Right.
I'm just telling you.
And AAYFA Championship is still one of the greatest days of the year.
The whole weekend. The whole weekend, yeah. Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. It turns out to be fantastic. And as soon as we get the playoff brackets in place, we'll bring those schedules to you, and you can get out and see some great playoff action as Bill and I get out there at least part of the weekend to try and see some of those games. This year on the main American Day, unfortunately, we're going to be in Orlando.
Yep, Central Florida game for Navy.
Orlando. Maybe Mickey Mouse will come see us.
That's right.
We can ask him who he thinks will win in the 9 and under American division. Coming up, we'll talk colleges as we get set to talk high schools, colleges, and the pros. In our remaining time here, we'll be back with more on the Gridiron Review. Welcome back to the Gridiron Review. Of course, last week we told you to get ready for it. It was the Battle of B&A Boulevard, and Bill, for the first time this year, after several close calls, games where they've been in the game for 2.5, 3 quarters, even 3.5, finally, North County breaks through for Quentin Jones with a win against the Glen Burnie Gophers.
And couldn't have picked a better time. Obviously, you want to beat your rival from right down the street, the Battle of B&A Boulevard. And, I talked to Quentin Jones, and, he replaced Albert Jones, who went over to Meade, had been the North County coach. And that's part of the problem is the turnover of head coaches there. And hopefully Quentin Jones is a good guy. I've met him. We have our end of season Anne Arundel County coaches meeting where they pick their all county, and the Capitol's involved with that, and I help run the meeting. And so I've gotten to know him there, a good guy, and he, working hard to build a program. They've got a couple really good players at North County. That's the thing. You think about a team that's 0-6, but it's because of total depth across the board of some of the issues, and that's what he's working to address. But Chris Leslie is an outstanding all-around player. He plays wide receiver. He plays running back a little bit on the defensive side of the ball. He's played 3 different positions. He's been the punter, the kicker. He's a really, really good player, Chris Leslie. And North County's got a good quarterback. Deontez Parker is a very fine quarterback, is a playmaker, very quick. Coach Jones said he's a lightning quick guy. So it's not, they've got some talent. It's just that there's not enough of it across the board to match up with this county's tough. You got Old Mill, Broadneck, Arundel, are all top teams. South River, Severn Park, Chesapeake are kind of on that next tier. And it's hard to get wins in this county.
Well, and as we talk about all the time, just because you're a 4A school doesn't guarantee you're going to have 100 kids come out and play football.
That's exactly right. Right.
That's also part of it. And I think that's part of the issue. And we've talked about several programs. And Northeast, I think, and Chesapeake are both great contrasts here to what North County and Glen Burnie are kind of going through. Yeah. Chesapeake and Northeast have worked very hard. Rob Elliott, Brian Balblitz have worked very hard to make football a cool thing in those buildings again.
Right. We're talking about a 6 or 7 year building process.
Right. It's been a cool thing to come back and play football at Chesapeake and at Northeast. And I think now they're trying to do the same thing at North County and at Glen Burnie. They got 1,500 kids in those schools. Just get 80 of them to come out and play football, and you've got some building blocks to be able to get a varsity and JV where kids can get the player development that they need to become a better program.
And what is more important than anything is continuity of coaching staff. I forgot, Marvin Brown was the head coach at North County, and he kind of got an issue was not fair. He was declared innocent of charges, but he lost his job because of it. It turns out it was all, trumped up. But they have gone through 3 coaches in the span of about 4 seasons in North County. So hopefully Quentin Jones can remain as the head coach and build some continuity, keep his coaching staff in place. That's how you get better. And that's also when the kids see that there's a coaching staff that's in place. You've got your weight program in the offseason. There's just so much that goes in to having a coaching staff in place. So I got to mention this one kid. He tells me he's got a freshman, William Stencil. 6'6", 320 pounds. He's a monster.
That's a great building block on that offensive line and defensive line.
Started several games as a freshman for North County. So keep an eye out for William Stencil. He certainly has the size.
You'll notice him when you see him out on the field. Look, I don't know what Josh Ehrlich is going to do for an encore. And I know in a short passing offense, it's not as if he's dropping back like John Elway and throwing 70-yard bombs and things of that nature at all times. And Bob Hoke from the Capitol is going to be writing about this soon. But Ethan Williams is on the verge of breaking some significant records in the receptions category. 3 more touchdowns this week for Broadneck at a 48-30 win over South River. But, man, where do you go from here? The numbers for Josh Ehrlich are going to be astronomical thanks to guys like Ethan Williams just on his very first year as he is a freshman for the Bruins. And right now, Broadneck just continues that role. Though, from some of the folks, talking to some folks who watch Broadneck out of the youth football, the one concern they have is defense maybe when they go up against somebody like a Wise or somebody like that. But otherwise, this team is just rolling right now, roughshod through Anne Arundel County.
Right. Well, I don't see them losing during the regular season. I mean, I don't see anyone beating them at this point. You talked about Josh Ehrlich. We knew he was going to be a good player. We saw him at the youth level. Just a good-looking player, well coached at with Broadneck coming up through the youth level. He's got great weapons. I mean, it's not just Ethan Woods. He got
Andre Woods had two. Tanaje Watts had a touchdown.
Jason Carcamo got out of the backfield. I mean, he's got some great weapons. But, obviously, he's been the key because Broadneck knew they had great skill players coming back and they needed someone to get them the ball. And obviously, freshman quarterback starting is a rarity. But, Broadneck looks very, very good so far. Tremendous season, and Coach Rob Harris got to give him a lot of credit.
Josh Kurzik with 2 touchdown runs for Northeast. They improved to 7-1, or 6-1 rather, after beating Southern by a score of 14-0. And I give the Bulldogs credit here. Northeast has been rolling for the most part. Came off a big win over Annapolis, and the Bulldogs, who, look, you talk about people in the building. I mean, Southern is the smallest school in the county by a wide margin. It's not even close now. In fact, they're probably closer to being a 1A than they are a 3A if you look in between where they are in the population. The Bulldogs have no bodies. Yeah. They got no bodies left. I mean, they've been playing JV football with like 14 guys. Varsity's down to like 20 healthy bodies right now.
It's a hard road.
Great job by Steve Erksleitman and his staff hanging in there against Northeast last week, who improves to 6-1. I think probably, Bill, the most surprising result of the weekend, probably not that Old Mill beat Chesapeake, but that they beat them 28-0. Good on Chad McCormick's kids who've had a tough first half of the season, but clearly have not thrown in the towel by any stretch of the imagination. Keep playing. It's a nice win for Old Mill, 28-0.
Yeah, this was a key test for Chesapeake because Chesapeake had won some out-of-county games and they beat some of the lower-level teams within the county, and it was going to be interesting to see, could Chesapeake beat one of the usual upper echelon teams like an Arundel, and obviously Broadneck got to Chesapeake pretty good, but they're doing that to everyone. But this, to me, was a key game because Old Mill is not quite the same Old Mill that we've known in the past, and it was a tough loss. And give Old Mill credit. That's an undefeated team they took down and did so in impressive fashion, 28-0, pretty convincing victory.
Oh, yeah, Joe Butler with a 32-yard run for the winners. Marcus Thompson threw for 162 yards in that game as well. And it's a big win for Old Mill to get to 4-3 because you get 7 points for beating the 3A, but Chesapeake's going to end up with 7 or 8 wins probably.
Right, there'd be a lot of bonus
points, which could be the difference right now for Old Mill in that battle for that 4th and final playoff spot in 4A East, because there's a log jam of teams there, and those bonus points from beating Chesapeake are going to come in very, very handy. Severn Park stays in the hunt for a playoff spot. They beat Meade by a score of 17-12. Jordan Hallett threw a touchation pass to Jeremiah Jennings.
Having a pretty good season. Yeah, every week we talk about him doing some good things. He's managing Severn Park's offense pretty well. And so this has been a bounce-back year for Severn Park. I think playing back, having home games again, real home games, instead of being at Kinder Park, actually playing in your own stadium, it has had to have helped them.
Yeah, their record now standing at 4-3, so they stay in the battle for a playoff spot as well. And that's going to be interesting to watch here over the last couple of weeks to see how those points play out for that 4th and final spot, because we've seen it before, Bill, where teams have not necessarily, played their best of the regular season, but you're good enough as the 4 seed. Sometimes you jump up there and surprise that 1 seed in the playoffs, or be the 3 and you jump up there and surprise the 2.
Speaking of seeds, Arundel had a nice firm grasp on the number 2 seed, but they almost got nipped this week.
It was in jeopardy.
When you said about surprising results, I think you're going to talk about that one because that's all I heard about Saturday. Annapolis was leading Arundel 34-0.
Yes.
34-0. They had Arundel down at Annapolis at home. The fans were going crazy, and it just all fell apart. And you probably got the numbers and who did what, I'm sure.
Jordan Andrews with 2 touchdowns, but Austin Sly hit R.J. Chandler, and then Clinton Mills converted the extra point for the go-ahead score with 7:52 to go for Arundel to come from behind and win that game by a score of 35-34. Just an amazing comeback. Hard to do.
Second major comeback for Arundel this year. If you recall, early in the season in the Jerry Mears Memorial Trophy game, they were losing to Meade by 24 points and rallied. So Arundel is getting our gutsy comeback team award, the Cardiac Kids Award. But that's an amazing. I mean, 34-0. That's hard to come back from 34-0.
It is, because you need a lot of possessions to do that.
And I hate to say it, Annapolis fans, it's hard to blow a 34-0 lead. That takes some doing.
It takes some doing because you got to have the ball that many times to get back in the game. Despite go ahead.
I was going to say, not a good week for the private schools this week.
No, despite 3 touchdown passes from Craig Stevens, John Carroll got by Severn by a count of 40-28. Big win for Calvert Hall. They've played really well so far this year. They're now sitting at 6-1 as they beat Spalding. Have been playing some good football, 21-7. It's a nice win for the Cardinals.
Yeah, and Bob Hoke, our high school sports editor, went out to cover that game, and it was a little surprising. Jaden Umbarger did not play very much. Wasn't sure if he got hurt or what was going on, but did not play a whole lot in that game. Just a kind of a poor effort by Spalding after coming off a huge victory we talked about last week when they beat St. Anthony's out of New York. And this was a huge MIAA conference game between 2 of the top teams and the league, and Spalding kind of didn't show for that one. But my guys, St. Mary's High School,
Bill's alma mater, Marcus Marshall, 200 yards,
and he is on the come. Marcus Marshall, the quarterback, and I ran into Jason Bedroni, the head coach, and his assistant. Jake Ganos, you may have remembered, Jake Ganos was an assistant coach under Charlie Weatherby at the Naval Academy, and when things went south and Charlie lost his job, Jake decided that he'd had enough of college coaching. He'd been doing it a long time. He had 2 young boys, Jason and his other son, both played at St. Mary's football and lacrosse, and decided to stay in the area. And to have a coach like that, that kind of ability on your staff is very helpful. And St. Mary's coaching staff has done a great job because if you recall, well, first of all, they won the MIAA B Conference Championship last year, and they got wiped out by graduation. They lost a significant senior class. So if you recall, early in the year, they were getting hammered. I mean, I think St. Mary's was
back in 4-3.
Yeah.
Chris Galini, the quarterback, threw for 86 yards in that game, and Alex Wicks went over
big
109. Saints ran for 351 yards in that contest.
Right. Now, I give their coaching staff a lot of credit. They had to build this team. It was a bunch of JV call-ups, a very young team. And again, early on, it looked bad. They suffered some significant losses, some real blowouts, unfortunately, and they have pulled it together, and they have now shown that they are definitely a contender for the MIAA B Conference Championship again.
Yeah, good to see them rebound after a tough September. When we come back, we'll talk colleges and pros as the mids of Navy host Ed Oliver and Houston coming up this week, one of the top 5 players in this upcoming NFL draft. Maryland with a big win against one of the worst college football teams you will ever see on planet Earth. We'll talk about those when we return on the Gridiron Review. Of course, as we wrapped up our high school segment, a lot of the great folks we see through the years get elected to the Anne Arundel County Hall of Fame, many of which have made significant contributions on the high school scene, and another good class going in this year, Bill.
Right. Well, and as it relates to our Gridiron Review television show, we want to specifically highlight Jeff Herrick, who is the great longtime head coach at Broadneck High School, did a lot of things, really established Broadneck as a state power, certainly in Anne Arundel County and the East Region power. I talked to Jeff at length today. He had that 13-0 team that lost to Damascus in the state championship game. Had a couple. He remembers a team that was 10-0 and got into the playoffs and ran into a Crossland team that was just an absolute juggernaut. But Jeff Herrick, congratulations, well-deserved going into the Arundel County Sports Hall of Fame. He joins his best friend Chuck Markowitz, joins his former coach Jerry Mears, and his brother Neil Herrick. And then also in terms of football, Don Sadler was an incredible running back at Roxeter School, which is not even around anymore. But in the 70s, the old-timers remember the Roxeter School was loaded with outstanding talent. And Don Sadler was one of their best players they ever had at Roxeter. Is a Rhodes Trophy winner. I think he was the 1976 Jim Rhodes Memorial Trophy winner as Anne Arundel County's best player. He's also being inducted. So congratulations to those guys as they go into the Anne Arundel County Sports Hall of Fame.
Maryland this week with a big win over Rutgers. Rutgers is just got awful. I mean, there's no other way to put it.
And they play really bad football.
I'm not sure
I couldn't believe what I watched.
I'm not even sure Rutgers could win any Division I football league in the country. Like, if they dropped down and played in the Sun Belt, they couldn't win the Sun Belt. They couldn't win Conference USA. I mean, they couldn't do it. Their starting quarterback was 2 of 16 before he got pulled in this game.
And he had like 5 interceptions.
Yeah, Ty Johnson ran for over 100 yards. Maryland, here's how Maryland makes a bowl game. They have Illinois coming up. You have to win that game. Illinois chump, they can't play. and then you play a game on the road at Indiana. You have to win that game, get you to 6 wins, you're in, because you're not beating Ohio State, you're not beating Penn State, you're not beating Michigan State and Iowa.
I think Iowa's on there, right.
So Illinois and Indiana are the 2 games, if you're a Terps fan, you got to zero in on those games right now. Those are the 2 you got to win to go to a bowl game somewhere, which would be an amazing story for Matt Canada with the way this season has gone and the chaos that in which it started.
Right. Well, I give them a lot of credit for sitting at 4-2 overall, 2-1 in the Big Ten. But the fact of the matter is, they have played the easier portion of the schedule.
The schedule's backloaded.
Right. The schedule is backloaded, and the wins are going to be hard to come by. But there's some positive momentum. Kids are feeling good about themselves. Need to get a little bit better at quarterback. I love Kasim Hill. He's a Crofton resident. Guy is going to be a great quarterback. He's not taken that step this year that I thought he would take, Pete. I thought he'd be a little bit better. 8 of 17
against a very mediocre club.
Right. And I tell you what, it's interesting. Dwayne Haskins was committed to Maryland, and he changed his commitment at the last second after Randy Edsall was fired as head coach. And Maryland said, we got Kasim Hill. And at the time of recruiting days, it seemed like Kasim Hill was similar to Dwayne Haskins in terms of the accolades and 5 stars, etc. But Dwayne Haskins is now a Heisman Trophy candidate, and boy, does he look good.
He does indeed look the part. That young man can play, and likely if he stays for another year at Ohio State, he's going to put up more big numbers and have a chance to contend for the Heisman next year. Meanwhile, in Annapolis, we were at Navy where the Mids jumped down with Garrett Lewis as the starting quarterback up 17-7, but unable to finish the game. Temple comes back and wins it by a score of 24-17.
Right. Well, now, obviously a little bit of a change at going into the game. We had thought that Malcolm Perry was going to remain the starting quarterback. Head coach Ken Niumatalolo had even said that earlier in the week. But as the week went along, he had some injuries at slot back. He wasn't liking what he was seeing out of some of his young slot backs, and he just decided, you know what, I'd rather have Malcolm at slot back, put Garrett at quarterback because we know what he can do. And so on Saturday, Garrett Lewis gets to start at quarterback. Malcolm Perry played slot back, and I thought the offense looked pretty doggone good for the better part of a half and into the first possession of the third quarter. But then things just went south, and it's almost hard to put your finger on what exactly happened, what changed. But Navy, I think they gained 217 yards up until that first possession of the third quarter when they scored on a 12-yard run by Nelson Smith, the fullback, who had an outstanding game, over 100 yards. But then from there on, they only gained 67 total yards on their final 5 possessions of the game. And Temple rallies from a 10-point deficit.
Well, I think it's what the coaches tell you, too. All 11 guys got to be on the same page, and clearly all 11 were not executing to the level against the Temple team that has really owned Navy the last 2 times they played them, especially on the defensive side of the ball. It doesn't get any easier with Mr. Ed Oliver and the Houston Cougars coming to town. Navy's next 4 opponents are combined 24-1.
It's unbelievable, right? And they could become
24-1.
They could become one of the first teams in college football history to play 3 undefeated schools in consecutive order, because they've got Notre Dame, Cincinnati, Central Florida, all of which are on the road. Technically Notre Dame is a neutral site game, but it's out in San Diego. So Navy has to win 7 games to go to a bowl, because they're playing 13 this year because they played Hawaii and it gave them an extra game. But that means you got to win 7. Navy's sitting there, at 3 wins?
2.
3, aren't 2. They? Okay. And so they've
got 2 and 4.
They've got to win 5 more games. Do you see 5 more wins on the schedule? Not going to be easy.
Let's see.
Tulsa, Tulane, Army. If you hope you will go,
that gets you to 5. So you still got to win 2 more. You got to win 2 of Houston, Cincinnati, Central Florida, Notre Dame.
Yeah, that's basically the bottom line of it. Yeah, going to be hard for Navy to make a bowl. They have dug themselves a hole.
But hey, until they take away the shovel, you have a chance to dig yourself out of the hole. Pros, Redskins and Ravens both win this week. Bill, I'm of the mind Baltimore's got the best secondary in pro football, and Tennessee total yardage 106 this week, dominating victory by that Ravens defense 21-0.
It's just so weird this season. Baltimore looks so mediocre on both sides of the ball against the Cleveland Browns and lose a real stinker of a game. That was just bad football. And, I
don't know, though. You lose 12-9. That's not on your defense.
Yeah.
That's on your offense.
Eric Weddle, though, said the defense didn't do enough. They took some credit for that loss. But, they turn around, and this was like a defensive performance for the ages. 11 sacks. They set a Baltimore Ravens record, which is really saying something considering what the Ravens have done over the years. Zadarius Smith is in there for 3 sacks himself. I mean, they really played some lockdown defense, and you said it, the secondary had a lot to do with it. A lot of these were coverage sacks, and Marcus Mariota's, sitting there trying to throw, and finally has to try to escape the pocket, and there's nowhere to go. But a dominating defensive performance for sure.
Meanwhile, the Redskins get a defensive stop late against Carolina, beat the Panthers. Cam Newton loses to the Redskins for the first time. He had come in 4-0 against Washington.
The Josh Norman Bowl.
Yeah, the Josh Norman Bowl. And look, I tweeted last week after that fiasco Monday night, he was going to play much better this week. Jay Gruden got his attention. He played a great football game on Sunday as the Redskins 3-2 in first place in the NFC East. And oh, those guys in silver and blue with that fancy star on the side of their helmet, they come to town this week to take on the Redskins.
And that's a good bounce-back win for the Redskins because that New Orleans game was a debacle and played much better on Sunday and had a lot of the elements of the offense working. We had connecting on some pass plays. How about our Vernon Davis, the ageless Vernon Davis down the middle for a nice touchdown
Ageless
grab.
male.
And that was a good win for the Redskins. Look good.
What I don't understand about the Vernon Davis touchdown, and you know me, I love the personnel aspect of football and I love the coaching aspect. Redskins had a two-man route. Jordan Reed went over here. 6 guys went that way.
Right.
Vernon Davis went over here. He just, hey, I'm
Wide
just chilling.
open. Wide open.
Chilling over here at the corner of the Royal Farms. Throw me the ball. And they did. He, of course, scored a touchdown. That'll do it for us this week. As always, we appreciate you taking the time to watch our program. Enjoy those highlights of our youth and high school teams. For Bill Wagner, I'm Pete Medhurst. We'll see you next week on the Gridiron Review.